Every time you pull the trigger on your shotgun, the firing pin hopefully hits the cartridge in front of it. This causes an explosion. An explosion that can go up to 17,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. This, mixed with the fact that your skin is salty and disgusting, and the air is humid, your gun will become dirty and rust will likely accumulate. This is why we need to clean guns and get guns serviced, to stop these factors causing misfires, mishaps, or general long-term damage. My gun was due a service, so I drove up to the factory, and after a telling off from Jim for not cleaning my gun, they serviced it.
Johnny doesn't take the best care of his guns like we would if we were looking after our own guns. So we've got Johnny's gun here today, and we're going to run through some basic maintenance, some advanced maintenance, cleaning, what you can do at home, how you can look after your shotgun to make it last longer. Obvious way to make your gun last forever is when you've purchased it, put it in the cupboard, never shoot it, wait for it to go up in value, and sell it in an auction at Holt's. Actually, you should only ever use good cartridges. The cartridges make a difference to the way the gun lasts. And you've got to think about that when you go out and buy your cartridges. Don't buy the cheapest stuff that you can get away with. Make sure you use something proper. Cheap cartridges leave a lot of residue behind, unburnt powder, they're overpressure, under pressure. First of all, gun cleaning and maintenance. When you take the gun apart, make sure you take it apart carefully. On this particular shotgun, pull the lever forward, releasing the catch, slide the forend forward, and lift it up over the ejectors. If you look, the ejector legs are there. If you were replacing it, we're going to go these pockets in here, back over the ejector legs, down, clip it on. Gently take it off. You shouldn't force anything. It should not need to be forced. Taking the barrels out of the action, holding the stock against your body, push the lever across, barrels forward until they stop of their own accord. They should just lift out the gun. Put them somewhere safe. Don't put them near the end of the bench. They will jump off. That's the way they work. Johnny has been looking after this gun. There's a bit of oil there. Little button there. Releases the top lever. Release the top lever back into the center position. Job done. Do a visual inspection of anything that we might need to look at, that we might need to do, that we can see obviously with this gun. Cleaning it. If you look inside, we can see there's a few bits of debris, bits of brass off the shells, and not much else really. It's quite clean. I'm surprised. Put it down on something soft. Don't put it on something that's full of metal bits or sharp bits or anything like that, because it will damage your woodwork, and you've looked after it a lot, so therefore don't damage it. We're going to take a look inside the forend. There are no obvious signs of wear or damage. There's a little bit of oil there. There's a few shiny spots, and that's where the barrels make contact with the forend metalwork. That's correct. The kickers are moving freely, and it all looks in pretty good order. A little bit of dirt, but that's fine. And the catch, we've tried that already. The spring in that feels fine. Although you're just taking it apart, you're actually checking things as you go. So we know the lever catch is working properly, the spring's still in good order. We go to the barrels. Check them externally first. We're looking for signs of wear or damage that may have been caused accidentally or unaccidentally, which does happen. These look pretty good. Check around the ejectors. Looks okay. The ejector retainers are in place. Where the barrel lugs lock into the action, make sure there's no damage there, because that will alter the way the barrels lock into the action. And the forend loop doesn't look marked in any way. There's no damage to it. When you see the little shiny spots on it, that's just where it's being acted upon itself, which is absolutely fine. It should look like that. Other end of the barrels, we're checking the chokes. The chokes are in firmly, that's fine. There's no signs of obvious damage there or dirt build-up, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to check the chambers, and they're relatively clean, relatively. in a kind of non-clean way. So Johnny's Christmas present list includes a chamber brush and a video on how to scrub your chambers and clean your gun correctly. So we'll send him this video for Christmas. Other than that, we're checking for dents on the barrels. Make sure that it hasn't inadvertently been banged or somebody's borrowed it from you and smashed it into a fence post.
I mean, let's be honest, it's pretty unlikely those barrels will be dented or damaged.
It is, but it can happen. So I have seen it happen. How the hell it happened, I do not know, but it did. It looks like somebody took them and beat them over the vise, like this. What we do is we run the light down the length of the barrels, and because the light bounces off a smooth surface really evenly and you get a really good reflection of it, it's very easy to see if there's even the minutest ripple in that barrel or a full ore in there. So you will see something, even if it's only like a 10 micron ridge in there, with bouncing the light off it, you can see it. So what you can do at home, cleaning wise. What we do here and what you'll do at home will be slightly different because we've got compressed air and you haven't. So invest in some good gun oil, and you need big cans of it, and there's a reason for it. This is what we do if we're cleaning something. Don't just give it a little spray and then wipe it off, because you're wasting your time. Get in there and give it a wash out, and you can do right over the top of the action underneath the top lever.
Providing you're using an oil like that is approved for wood.
That's it.
Browning Legier is a fantastic, fantastic product.
It is, so you can wash out all in there, and we are literally washing it out. Wipe off the excess, and the same in there. So, in the factory, what we would do, we take an airline, and we blow it out. So everyone should really just buy an airline, so much easier. Checking the operation of the safety catch, feels fine, clean underneath it. Move the top lever out the way, get under there, clean it. Don't get any bits of paper stuck underneath the top lever, that stops it from working properly. Don't wedge it underneath like that and then get it stuck under there, because you will. Now what we've done is we've cleaned it, and we look inside. Bit of oil's got in oil firing pins, that's good. Bit of oil down inside the cocking rods, that's good. Everything in there now. No metal debris in there, nothing left in there. It's oiled. You can put it in the cupboard, just like that.
Jim, grease.
I prefer not to.
You prefer to not grease?
Grease is good, but actually some of the parts in these mechanisms are very light springs in them. If I demonstrate here, the cocking rods, some of the springs in this have got very light springs in there, or not massively heavy springs in there. And the cocking rods particularly rely on being able to return at a certain speed. If you put too much grease in there, or put grease in there, they will slow down. And what will happen then is your gun will eject before it's supposed to, and you'll eject live cartridges. I've seen that when there's been a lot of grease in there. The cocking rod's slowed down, the gun ejects before it's supposed to because the cocking rods went all the way forwards, or it doesn't work on time, or all your timing goes, and it's a mess. If you need a bit more lubrication, we use oil. This is a 32 weight oil, something like gun oil or a good quality engine oil. I mean, it's going to do the same job, because oil is oil.
No, definitely you're incorrect there. Because it says gun oil on gun oil.
No.
It says engine oil on engine oil. They're different things.
They're mechanical. So it's just like an engine, but it's a gun engine rather than a car engine. It's got mechanical metal bits in there. And I can't recommend any brands particularly, but one of them is kind of magnetically sticks itself to the surfaces, and it could be made by somebody, I don't know, Castrol. The reason we use oil, not grease, oil works as a total loss system. The oil will run off and take debris with it. Grease will catch the debris and turn into a grinding paste. So if you get sand in there or grit of any kind, like, I don't know, shooting on the beach, the grease will hold the grit and it'll turn into a grinding paste, and you'll start damaging everything and wearing it out faster. Oil runs out, so use oil. So you just put a drop in and a drop in, and that sounds like a lot of a drop, but the reason being is I want the excess to run off, taking all the muck and dirt with it, and that's it. And when you assemble it, we do exactly the same thing. There's a lot of talk about over-oiling a gun, tipping loads of oil down it and damaging the wood. I don't believe you can. The stocks on most modern guns have got a lot of wood in them. They're sealed as well. When we seal the outside of the wood, we seal the inside as well. So it's not like on an old English gun where it's had 200 years of bad turpentine-based oil soaking into the wood. When you think about modern oil versus the oil that you would have got 100 years ago, there was a lot of bad chemicals in the wood, bad chemicals in the oil that soaked into the wood and potentially damaged the wood. I think stocks break after 200 years anyway, and modern guns, people tend to change their stocks more than they change their underwear. So I don't think it's a problem. Then we come to the fore end. We know the catch is working properly. The kickers are operating. Now, you at home probably won't know what that tension on those kickers should feel like. They should return with a good solid click. If they're not bouncing back like that, they're either dirty beyond belief, or there's something jammed in there, or the springs have failed and it needs new springs because they've corroded or something like that. Exactly the same again. Spray that in there, and you're aiming to wash out any of the stuff that's got in there. Operate them a few times. Same in the catch. And let all the dirt run out. Wipe off the excess. If you do have an airline handy, so the barrels. First of all, we're going to make sure we're clean around the ejectors, and we're going to wash this out and re-lubricate it. We have a little space here, and what we do is we will spray a bit of oil around it. If we don't want to strip out the ejectors, we'll move on to stripping out the ejectors in a few moments, but we just put some oil in there. We'll do it with the leisure spray first, operate the ejectors, then clean them out, and then put some oil in there.
You don't recommend people take their ejectors out every time?
No. To operate them is put them down on the bench, like that. Now this is where the airline's really useful. Now they're pretty clean. Take our good oil, drip it in there, and in there, a few drops on the plungers with the springs, operate it a few times. Wipe off the excess oil, and we're good to go. Cleaning the chambers. If you're going to do it on the bench, it's probably a good idea. Put them on the bench, get someone to hold them for you so that you can use two hands for cleaning with the chamber brush, and you're not likely to slip and knock the barrels on the floor. We're going to use the vise. Don't squash them. You don't want to break that glue that holds the rib on. Chamber brush, it's a copper or a bronze chamber brush. The reason we use bronze or brass is because we don't want to damage the metal. If we use a steel chamber brush, the steel wire is very hard and it's likely just to scratch it and do nothing else, and you will damage the barrel bores. So it's always got to be a bronze brush, and this is what we do with it. Put some of our lubricant in the chambers, put the brush in, and go backwards and forwards while twisting it a little bit. And the other one. So as you can see, there's a bit of dirt in there. That means this careful owner hasn't been as careful as we'd like him to be.
I feel guilty.
So there's a little bit of dirt in there. I've seen worse once.
Why don't you not use barrel cleaners or bore solvents?
We don't need to.
I mean, that's good enough.
Normally, if there's a big buildup of lead in the bore, we'll polish it out with an abrasive stick rather than trying to wash it out, because it doesn't really work.
I mean, 009 does, but it also gives me asthma attacks, so...
It's probably not the best thing to use. We have our special cleaning rod, a Jag. These are a very high quality piece of hydraulic tube, plastic hydraulic tube, with a split in the end and a rag poke through it. This one has probably cleaned around 4,000 barrels, and it's still going. So it's a nice inexpensive tool for cleaning your bores. It's hard to put in your pocket, and it won't fit in your kit bag. So taking the ejectors out, push the ejector all the way down. This is why it's easier in a vise, or you get someone to hold it. We have a little screw that fits in there. Lift out the little retainer. Carefully release the ejector, because it will want to spring out. If you look how much stuff we didn't manage to clean out of there, this is why you do take them out and clean them. Give you an idea of the amount of dirt in there. That's it. So it does build up. Same with the spring. You can see where the string's just been sat there. A lot of muck in there. Same again, we're going to wash the parts. Washing the spring. The amount that we're using here, I wouldn't use here. We'd only give it a little spray and then blow it off. But if you're doing it at home, then you haven't got that choice. Down the hole. Spring in there. Make sure there's no rust in there. Tip out the excess oil. Out comes the dirt with it. We're going to apply a little bit of waterproof grease to this with a drop of oil, because the grease is quite thick and the oil makes it a bit thinner. Make sure you put the spring back in the right way up. On our springs it has an open end and a ground end. And on the ground end, if you look, it's flat. And on the open end, it's curly like a pig's tail. The pig's tail goes in the hole. Plunger goes in. Magic oil underneath the ejector. Make sure it's operating freely. Hold it down. Replace the little plunger. Job done. Reassembly. Take your gun. Do not force the barrels into the receiver. They should just drop in gently. Forend on carefully. Check it opens and closes and everything moves freely. You're good to go. Owen's our master gunsmith, been trained with us for the last 5 years. He knows how to build these things in his sleep.
Hi, my name's Owen. I've been working here for 5 years now, servicing and building guns for Longthorne. I've just taken the ejectors out of this gun now, and we're going to move on to the chokes.
What should people do with their chokes?
The chokes are pretty simple. You just need to take them out every time after you use them and give them a good clean. So they just unscrew out of the barrels using the choke key provided in the set. And as you can see, Johnny's are really quite dirty.
Do you grease them when you put them back in?
I do grease them, yeah.
Good.
Just a small amount of the same sort of marine grease as we used on the ejectors.
How tight are you putting them back in?
I normally do them just until the key slips, so I'm not pushing it in too hard, just until it breaks loose slightly, and that's tight enough.
So what happens if chokes get stuck?
We have a special tool for getting them out. If they're really stuck, then we will very carefully machine the choke out the end of the barrel. Why did it get stuck, you're about to ask? It's because the chokes are 17.4 pH stainless steel, so they won't corrode. But what you're doing is forcing a lot of gas up behind the choke. As you let it get more and more dirty, the gas and the residue from shooting gets behind the choke and pushes it in more and more muck and dirt can get behind it, starts to corrode and seizes the choke into the barrel.
Now I'm going to take you through the part that you've all been waiting for, dismantling the whole action and showing you how to service it. Apologies for me being bent over, my bench is normally on the blocks over there, but we had to move it for Jim. First thing that's got to come off is the pad. We'll grease the screwdriver so that it doesn't split the rubber when you push it in.
Apologies for the state of this pad, that was my fault in a pinch needing to shorten it because I got fat.
Surprisingly a good job with a hacksaw though. So the next thing I'm going to do is loosen the stock slightly to take some of the pressure off the side plates. And I'll stand it up so that I can get to the screws in the side plates.
At what point do you drop the top lever over? I would have always done that first thing.
You don't actually have to do it on our guns to get it off. You can, there is enough room to get the stock off underneath it. But now you've mentioned it, I will do it. Leaving the front two in, I'll just tap the stock back slightly so that it completely releases those, and then I'll take the two front screws out.
How long did it take you to learn to do this easily?
So I started on building side locks and servicing side locks, so coming onto the trigger plates was actually fairly easy for me. Probably 6 months until I was like completely confident that I could do it without asking Jim about any little niggles and stuff like that, but then I'm still learning every day, so. Next, we're going to be getting the trigger plate out. First of all, the safety needs to be removed, which is just one small pin in here. And then the safety just pulls out of the top, like so. Now we can access the T15 in the top and the T15 in the bottom.
My gun is one of the last ones with a T15, right?
It is, yeah. We've now switched to, it's still a T15 in the top, but it's a slotted screw in the bottom. We do also Loctite those screws in, so there's no chance of them working themselves loose.
What colour Loctite?
Pink Loctite, because the green Loctite we'd really struggle to get them back out again, ever. But the pink Loctite just locks them in enough that they're not going to work loose. The next step is to remove the whole trigger plate, so you can just pull that out. Next we'll remove the lifters, the lifter springs and pins, and the cocking rods. So they are pushed by the kickers on the cocking rods. They push on the lifters, which then lift under here and cock the hammers back. Where I'm pushing at the bottom is normally where the kicker would push. So the kicker would push there, which pushes the lifter up. That in turn pushes on the bottom of the hammer and cocks it back. So to take them out, just need to push this pin out. Cover it up because the springs will ping out. And the easiest way to get these out is just to tip it up.
How often should people have their guns serviced?
When I see them after a year, they are dirty. It's not rusty dirty, but they are dirty, and it can obviously turn to rust if it's not oiled and that sort of thing. So it's best for them serviced once a year. I can take it completely apart and clean the entire thing, and it's effectively brand new again then. If you let it go past a year and the years start to drag on, then you can really run into some reliability issues because it's gone rusty and that sort of thing inside, which is just from lack of maintenance. Next, I'm just going to take the safety spring off, removing it with a T8. The next thing to remove is the hold open, which is just here, using a T10. The next thing to remove after that is the firing pin retainer pin, and that is just through here. All the pins go in from the left-hand side through to the right-hand side, so they all need pushed out from the right to the left, because the head on the pin is slightly larger, just to hold it tightly in the hole. The next thing to remove is the firing pins and springs. Just to get the firing pin springs out, and then you just need to use an Allen key or a poke to just pull the firing pin spring out with both holes. The next part to remove is the top lever. So to remove that, you want to hold in the top lever return spring with a screwdriver. Then you can wiggle the top lever slowly out all the way. Next is to remove the top lever return spring. So you just need to get something in the hole. There's the spring. After that, you just remove the bite. You just want to push it up with your finger from the face and pulling it out. That's all of the parts out of the action now. As you can see, there's not loads of parts in the main action body, but we'll get onto the trigger plate next. First thing I'm going to do before dismantling the trigger plate is to just fire it. To know which barrel's first, you can see on the trigger sear, just down here, that the larger sear is the first barrel. So this one is bottom barrel first. And there's our mechanical trigger. So fire it, and then you can remove the springs. So this is the main spring unit. It consists of 4 parts: the spring, the mainspring top hat, the mainspring nut, and the shaft that the mainspring sits on. We set these when we first build the gun, and they don't need to be reset. If they do lose spring tension, then we will replace the whole unit. Next, I'm going to remove the trigger guard, and that is 1 pin here, and it screws in at the front. So I just need to tap this pin out. Just using a small punch, tap the pin out of the other side. Then what you can do is hold the trigger guard in the vise. Just for people wondering, these jaws are made of lead because they don't damage the parts at all. They're much, much softer than any of the parts that we use. To remove the trigger guard, you then just need to lean it forwards, just to drop the little pin out of the back there. Then we can go on to unscrewing it. In the trigger plate, all of the pins go in from right to left, as opposed to the action where they're going from left to right. First, we will push the tumbler bolt pin out. There's your 2 tumblers. Next, it will be the sear plunger retainer. And then the trigger pivot pin, which also is the sear pivot pin. So you can then remove the sears with their plungers and springs in, and bring the trigger down. Then you can tap the trigger sear pivot pin out. And remove the trigger completely away, and then the sear pivot pin should just push out. This is our inertia block, and this is the trigger sear, which we can switch for if you want bottom or top firing first. This is the inertia block spring and return pin also. This is the trigger spring that we use. It sits just in here on the trigger. It pushes up against the bottom of the inside of the trigger plate. We do now make a selectable trigger, but personally I prefer this system. It's just simpler. There's only one more piece on this trigger plate, which is the rear support, but I wouldn't normally remove that. That is also Loctited in, so that is never meant to come undone.
So there you go, from the horse's mouth, how to maintain your gun and then how to strip it for service. Obviously, reassembly is in pretty much the reverse order for every shotgun, or more or less every shotgun. Some will require spring compressors, some will require various little bits, but for the most part, it is just watch that video and rewind. Opinions on lubrication will differ. Obviously, Jim loves oil and made a very good case for it. When reassembling shotguns, obviously there needs to be a little bit of grease in the more high wear spots, but it needs to be limited to just those for those friction surfaces. Most shotguns don't have too many of those, to be honest. If the gun is disgusting and dirty inside, sonic baths, boiling it in certain solutions can go really well, or just good old-fashioned elbow grease and wire wool. The more guns you service, the more you realise what's right and what's wrong, and that's what Owen said in that film is, after a while you just learn to problem solve and realise what normal is and understand the issues. Maintaining your gun at home is vital. Servicing your gun at home, just make sure that you're actually qualified for that job and understand what you're getting yourself into before doing it. It can lead to complications down the line, and some of those can be dangerous. So just be careful, guys.